Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CoStar News Hotels podcast. I am news editor Sean McCracken here, as I am every month, with STR's head of the Asia Pacific region, Jesper Palmqvist. And I am noticing on the video feed that you guys don't see a small white dog in the background, who is, I guess, joining us as a bonus guest in this recording. Jesper, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying the World Cup in a different time zone, and I'm plugging away, looking towards the second half of the year.
So obviously, yet another eventful month in and across Asia. Let's start off with, as we usually do, your travels across the region. You were mentioning before our call that you just went to yet another big conference. Tell us about what your takeaways are from your trip to Bangkok.
Yeah, Bangkok has this owner event there, CS by Hoftel, and it sits in nicely there as budgeting really kicks in. So it was one of the as good attendance. It's really owner related across a few different asset classes, but obviously focusing on hospitality. It was good attendance this year, great conversations for a couple of days in Bangkok, and the key headlights that we got there is people are generally, well, there's the development pipeline. It's a headline that doesn't mean too much when you look at the number, but technically it's an all-time high. Almost 2,500 projects around. India is about a third of that, speaks to the activity in that country. So development gearing up towards the end of the decade, like we talked about for a while, and into the next decade. We've seen continued rate growth that helps profitability. We expect a slowdown in H2. So there was conversations about that from a concern as well. And then add an owner event. A lot of it is around what is the financial climate? Because what are the owners and how they're investing, where the money is moving. Capital is flowing a little bit better than last year. And in the last quarter, it's just more selective. Safer markets in that. We're seeing that across the world and here as well. The lender confidence is coming back, but the big thing is the refinancing that puts pressure because those debt service coverage ratios has dropped down. So you get this big jump in debt service when it resets, and equity gets in and it slows transactions down. But Japan is still in many sessions front. It's a standout. Global capital is still going in there. You have dedicated funds that keeps coming in to lock in that cheap financing. But fundamentals are still strong because we have strong demand into the region. And even if that growth is slower, people see, all right, flights are coming. We're less exposed to geopolitical things. So when the rate growth is there, demand is going, we have reasonably high productivity, there is still optimism, which means that people then look at, hang on, what the credit risk is. People start looking at that as well. Because right now we're not releasing too many supplies, so it's more credit risk. Maybe the outlook is weaker towards the second half if inflation and delayed rate cuts put something, but generally a pretty half optimistic view, I would say, from that event.
From your perspective, have financing sources shifted much across Asia Pacific? I ask just because we've had some stateside reporting about the fact that, investors in the U.S. have had to lean on kind of alternative financing mechanisms a lot more over the past few years. Traditional lenders have remained sidelined post-COVID. I wonder whether that's the same scenario you're seeing or whether it's different.
I think it's less. We definitely talked about it and we heard that people are looking at it, but there's still so much of the traditional capital that is moving, and it's still about rebalancing of the portfolios.
Yeah.
So you would have people saying like, in owner X will leave their office assets in market Y to then go into hotels in market C. That's a classic example that we're seeing more around. So that is repositioning right now, and that doesn't say anything around what's happening in the winds. It's just that someone has made gains for 7, 8, or 10 years in that they will reposition it now, and I think that's what we're seeing more.
It is amazing how much of the kind of ability to get things done in this industry is reliant on balance sheets of big banks and how much hotels they want. at any given time. And I mean, here we've had this kind of remix of like they don't want hotels on their balance sheet, so they'll lend to private credit lenders who will then lend for hotels. So, you know,
That's right. That's right. And I think if you want to right now for a quick snapshot of where money's moving in an instant, I think Hong Kong is a great place to look because that's where a lot of action is. It's a
mhm.
market that is definitely has been for a while, and coming back. It's finding its place in GBA, I mean Shenzhen and China and everything, but finance and both in assets and owning and trading around there. So that's a good place to start looking if anyone out there is interested in where the money's going right now.
So, I mean, as we talk about where investors want to put their money, there has been a lot of talk globally, I think, around investors' interest in, I think, what we colloquially call ultra luxury, because it's not an actual official segment by anybody who categorizes these things. But how is the appetite for those kind of highest of high end properties shaping up?
Yeah, definitely one of the more interesting because how many how many years, and this is before any recent crisis or slowdowns, right? High-end hotels tend to do better. And it was always luxury. And as the big global hotel groups started acquiring or introducing luxury, or what they say is luxury, that's always debatable. And then you had
Mhm,
independent luxury hotels that haven't been around for too long that exist. You can see clearly that trend line, especially with such tremendous rate growth that is much faster than everyone else. So luxury. So the question that we get more and more is, of course, yes. So people want to invest in luxury because they see what that means, and yes, it depends on where. But in core markets, right, core, that is such a great investment. And if you're a brand, associate, then clearly that's what you want to do. But then it leans into that ultra, and again, it's not a class. And we go, oh, can't you introduce, STR coaster? Please introduce an ultra. It's like, no, like, why? We explain it very often.
there's
Like
just simply not
it's
enough of them, right? Like it
well, there's that, but there's also like, listen, a person X at luxury brand one will say, I am ultra luxury. And then another guy
mhm,
will say, no, you're not. And I don't disagree. Our our position in this world is to be neutral and make sure it grows. And obviously rate is a good factor in this. I'm not saying that because it's been for 40 years, it still works, but kinda. Rate is a good
mhm,
indicator what people are prepared to buy and pay for. So
yeah,
what we started doing to make sure that people don't say ultra luxury so much, we introduced bougie class. And for those of you not familiar, and if you don't have teenage daughters or slightly older, bougie. It's a weird expression because to be bourgeois doesn't mean ultra luxury in its original phase, but they take this word and make it good. So I
mhm,
like it. So my daughters would definitely call these ultra luxury hotels. They would call it bougie class. So we did that, and
mhm,
and the question then is like, how many hotels do you choose in a market? Right? Do you handpick? Well, then it's kind of my opinion, and then Sean is going to pick some others. So we went back to ADR, and if you pick only 4 or 5, it's too few. If you pick, too many, then you get the non-bougie stuff, and it doesn't work, right?
yeah,
So we found a number where that sweet spot is, where you see that, and we looked at the 10 global markets just to see what is that gap, and that was kind of cool. How much? And we have released that a few times, so I don't think it's a secret, but it is insane what the difference is in Paris. Paris is
mhm,
consistently the bougiest of them all, and that was presented in Bangkok. Mirror, mirror, who's the
mhm,
bougiest? It is Paris. It's a huge difference. They get 3 to 4x higher rates on a 12-month basis than a luxury hotel, and the luxury will
yeah,
be similar. So New York and London, no surprise, as financial markets are behind the 2 and 3. And I think the example I can say, if you're a retail brand, I do luxury scarves or whatever, luxury water. They, to have it your so-called hydration break, which is really an ad break. Hello, North America. Uh, that you will
yes,
drink.
this is how we do sports here.
Correct, and you gotta don't put my sport to shame. You gotta stop. You gotta stop. But it's too much money. I get it. It's $7 million in ad time. Fine, go FIFA. Apparently, so if you are that luxury brand, listen, where would you put? I will put my scarf name on a hotel. You're not going to go to Bangkok. You're not going to go to Hong Kong. You're not going to go to money markets. Paris is the number one choice because they have rates of $2,500, right? These hotels are
Mhm.
$2,500 ADR on a 12-month basis. New York and London slightly behind. What's interesting was Tokyo. Tokyo has moved up in that. So from an Asian lens, because of introduction and more to come, you got Dorchester and other things coming. So it pushes that. And I like
Mhm.
that gap as well, how big that is as well. So no doubt people want to invest in luxury and they see that ultra luxury like, wow, that's even more foolproof and how that grows. Uh, so it's a brand play and a rate play, right?
Mhm. All right. So before our call, you mentioned interesting things happening in Seoul. What do we have going on there?
Yeah, I think Seoul is. And when it's easy to say, okay, well, let's talk about Korea. No, let's talk about Seoul. Like to some degree, you can talk about Jeju, the island down there, but mostly it is about Seoul because even if there's interest and some hotels, of course, there's some activity in Busan and Daegu and on the East Coast in Pyeongchang and in the mountains, but it's Seoul is the market where the majority of investment and transactions and hotels. And while there are some greenfields, there are some areas where new hotels are coming. It's not the same as in Japan where you like there's way more to repurpose for efficiency. That still exists, yes, but it depends on which corner of the market, high end or not. But both domestic brands and international, there are high end hotels coming into Seoul. People want to invest in there. It's it's Korean money. It's also foreign money that are coming in and really enjoying this market that has been talked about for a long time, but also means that people want to get in. So I think global money coming in because we've seen Korean money, like I said earlier, we've seen Korean money coming out of it, and now we're seeing Korean foreign money coming in and Korean money, obviously with the low interest rates as well there as well.
All right. So we talked a bit last month about kind of a shift from certain markets to kind of new frontiers across the region.
Yeah.
What are you hearing in that regard?
Yeah, it's particularly in Southeast Asia, which is such a strong competitive market, tourism, resorts, that sure cities are doing things, but we spent some time looking into detail on one of the hottest markets from foreign direct investments, brand, which is still Vietnam. And it's interesting if you are an owner, not only do they have, three, four different temperate zones in a market that size, but it really depends on what you want as an investor because we talked earlier about Phu Quoc, the island there, which is so different from obviously Phuket, but also from Nha Trang and Cam Ranh. So Phu Quoc is moving from being a very domestic market, and people thought, oh no, it gets far, but it's highly domestic, right? And 2 years in a row, this market has at peak level have the same occupancy of Phuket. That means you're competing. We now see two hot peak seasons, but the difference is Phu Quoc has 6 months off, 6 months on. So the big debate is really that extreme seasonality, which is not a unique thing in Southeast Asia, but it is here, right? You have it in Caribbean, you have like in many markets around the world. How do you deal with that? As an owner, you go in because Phu Quoc has way bigger that when you see Nha Trang has international rivals like Russia, China, you know, ex-Soviet Union countries, etc. So seeing that and, you know, stable yields, great beaches, maybe a little too many condos over time for supply. But there's a huge difference between these different resort markets, even in a country like Vietnam. So I think that's the take one. You really got to study what these pockets do from a source market and financials and who's staying there. Like it's massive differences, and seasonality plays a huge role as well now.
Mhm. So anybody who has listened to kind of our monthly check-ins about Asia Pacific will know that the through line is talking about how great Japan has done and how constantly expected to come back down to earth. Where are we at in Japan right now? And has momentum shifted at all?
Well, yeah, it's definitely a story people follow. And I mean, first of all, the yen, if people track the currency, it is now the lowest since 1986,
Hmm.
right? And I used to, the first time in Japan was in 98. I remember going like, wow, I didn't know, was this low? And that was the lowest for a long time. And now we're living there. And 1986, I mean, Sean, you're old enough. That's Top Gun, Platoon, and those movies came out. And for the Japanese
I will
example,
point out for my I turned 2 at the end of 1986, so
sure,
I don't
sure, sure.
remember that much of it.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough. But more importantly for you, than for a Japanese example, for to educate you on this, I don't know if you're a Studio Ghibli fan, the
I am,
animated
I very
movies.
much am.
So 1986 was the year when they released their first feature film, Tenku no Shiro Laputa, Castle in the Sky, the Laputa
Well,
film.
that's
That was
okay, we can get into the debate about this because 'cause I'm a big enough fan to know that is technically the first, although Nausicaa
feature.
Valley of Wind came out first to finance the founding of the studio,
That's it.
correct?
This is the feature, exactly. So I think it was a milestone because of the reception that it got. I love that.
Mhm.
This is I love how this is turning into an anime a
I
discussion
can
now
also
because
get really in the weeds too because I actually just a few weeks ago got the Steelbox version of Lupin the Third: Castle of Cagliostro, which was the
oh,
first feature film
yes.
that Miyazaki directed and is still wonderful. Steven Spielberg says possibly the greatest action film of all time.
Some of those movies have forged how Western directors make movies, like the
It
storytelling
has,
and the
very much,
emotional
yes.
impact on people. Absolutely. We can safely say, if listeners haven't watched, there's a massive back catalog over 40 years, right? Go back and check the best Ghiblis and you will not be disappointed. But back to Japan, what's happened
Yes,
is,
back to Japan.
yeah, so this castle in the sky as Japan has been, but when they lost the 55% in the first 4 months of Chinese, almost like 80% of that loss was replaced by Korea.
Mhm,
And they were talking mainland Chinese, but Korea, the US, and also Taiwan traveling
mhm,
into and just increasing and eating that up, which displaced, then it changed not just, who's coming in, but obviously the rate. And we talked about that, how Western Japan and Osaka a little bit more. Osaka is not just that it's Chinese. They had obviously the expo last year, which on the comparables makes it hard. But most of the markets, all right, growth in rate and length of stay because you have this different kind of customer. When you have that momentum, it turns out maybe this is the first time we're seeing where that Chinese impact on geopolitics has less effect than we've seen before. It's a great example of that. And as a result, with very little new supply, increased efficiencies in hotels in Japan, we will just see gently tightening of the growth curves, but it's still growth in there. So I mean, it all depends on what the funds that are being created to invest in Japan and
mhm,
what their returns are calculated on. Because obviously, you're not going to see these same rate growth curves for the next X years, but still a very good market to get into. People want to be in there because performance looks pretty good.
mhm. So, obviously, a lot of our discussions, specifically around airlift, have revolved around the disruptions in the Middle East because of war. It seems like we have more kind of hopefulness that that's going to be resolving, than we've had in a little while. What are you seeing in terms of I mean, obviously, the Middle East is such a huge gateway for airlift from, the Western Hemisphere to the East. Um, how are you seeing that kind of play into travel across Asia?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line was always that we didn't see the indirect impact when we talk about, we didn't see that much. You will see some resorts and some locations that had Middle Eastern travelers, yes, were more dependent on that airlift. But when you're in the single digits of total arrivals, which most of these countries are, that are
Mhm,
dependent, and we're not talking direct Middle Eastern travel, depend on that, it is a lower factor. And when that demand growth is growing on intra-ASEAN and American, Australians, etc., that safe haven context has worked. And when we're now hopefully seeing, I mean, we are seeing when domestic hotels in Middle East week over week starts to recover, that is such a great sign to compare with the airlift and how that is returning. It's returning, and then you're seeing less cancellations, which means less cancellations on the short haul for fuel and all that stuff as well on European flights. That means we right now, it looks like, right, if it is a one tertial or one quarter bigger issue, we still think like for Middle East, drag effect, and we won't see a comeback until 27, right? So it'll be a couple of quarters of that. But for Asia and Asia Pacific as a whole, it holds up well. So if this is phasing out now, then we'll see less of an effect, a little bit of a drag, but demand strong enough from other markets to keep growing it, which is it's a good sign.
Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about the big global news, and obviously towards the end of these conversations, we always segue into sporting discussions. Obviously, the big global sports news is the World Cup. And I will start this with the asterisk to any of our listeners that if you're listening to this when it publishes, just know that
Yeah.
our
It's not a daily
discussion will be
podcast.
our discussion will be less up to date and less relevant than earlier in the week. We'll have a podcast checking in on kind of right ahead of round of 32 from our colleague Trevor Simpson and
That's right.
Didio Pequeño, who will be very on topic, very much talking about the hotel implications, and will be as up to date as possible. We are neither of those things right now. So,
No,
how are you
we're just
feeling about?
excited. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it's obviously a great. I mean, I love the World Cup. I've watched it since '82, and I think it's amazing. It's different in many ways, up and down. Um, like some of the games that listeners may have seen as well, like when weather starts impacting. Yeah, having outdoor sports in summer in the Midwest of US, not always a good planning idea, right? Because you will have thunderstorms and lightning happening.
Mhm.
Um, and again, the ad breaks and things. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, bloated." It's the World Cup. It's the biggest thing in the world, and football slash soccer is huge. And what we need is a good for Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. Also, I think generally, if they do well, it feeds the whole vibe and everything. And
Yes.
when this is released, yes, there's still good representation. They've done really well, and I think that's important. And
FIFA seems to make sure that the host countries outperform a
now I'm
little
not going to
bit.
go into like if we go down the line of any shenanigans like that, that's a long list and a different podcast that is sent at a different time of our. But the as long as Sweden wins the World Cup, I'm okay.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so you guys kind of got buried in a really tough group. But as I'm looking at it
It's a
right
good group.
now, the Athletic has you guys. It was 95% chance of advancing, most likely as third in your group, but still advancing
Yeah,
is
and I
advancing,
tell you
right?
what, the Athletic need to go back and check their maths. That's total BS. Like, there's no way, because when you are, if and this will have happened by now, our game against Japan. But if they, I will say, if they had lost, which they
Mhm.
didn't, I think they won by 2-1. Uh, speaking into the future, Great Scott! I think they would have. Then you are negative, right? And then there's
Mhm.
8 better third positions, so it's nowhere near 90%. We will need to win that one and then move on. And this, what you see, everyone knows that France, Spain, Argentina, some of those countries are playing fantastic football, and
Mhm.
that's the expectation, that you'll see them go far. So it's about who is that dark horse that comes up there, and I'm still hoping that we can. But
Well, they have you basically as clinching with a draw, so it's not
yeah,
just winning in. So you got that
that's
going
it.
for you.
That's it, right? That's it. And, but while all this is going on, and you have one eye on the baseball, you do know that just like when we're recording this, we're about we passed 2/3 in on the group stages, and which season is also 2/3 in the group in the season. That is footy. The AFL is 2/3
Mhm.
in. 16 out of
Before we
24.
move on from World Cup, I will
Yeah.
say,
Go on.
in my heart of hearts, obviously, I don't believe the U.S. is going to win the World Cup. It would be wonderful and joyous. I don't believe it's
Oh,
going to
so not
happen.
even a whisper it quietly? You're not going there?
But you know what? you all like as someone from the U.S. who's watched World Cup football over the years, you kind of tend to like, all right, I'll pick a different team because the
Yeah.
U.S. is this is not our sport. Will never be our sport. It has never been our sport. But I feel like the last
Unless you're the women's team, because
okay,
they rule.
that is the bit. Okay, that is a fair point and an important caveat because,
Yep.
and it's
Amazing team.
honestly the bit that annoys me the most about the U.S. World Cup broadcasts
Yep.
is that we still roll out Lexi Lawless and then a bunch of people who are
Oh
not
my god. Oh my
American,
god, Alexi, stop it already.
and we
At least
have
Zlatan is there to put him in his seat with Thierry
there's
Henry.
at least a dozen women who are
Yes.
so much more qualified to
100%.
take those seats because we have the most dominant women's team in the history of the sport. But
And if you look
anyway,
at the broadcasting across all the major European countries, studio and broadcasting, women. So
but I'm kind of softly backing Japan because their fans make it so easy. Like the Japanese soccer fans are so easy to get behind just because of the whole MO of trying to make wherever they're at a little bit nicer.
it's an awesome thing. And here's a really cool story about the most popular fans that still I still believe it's the Scottish, right? The Tartan
Well,
Army.
yeah, but they're the opposite. They're
No,
as
nah,
sloppy as
no,
you
so
can get.
here's why I'm going to call you out on that because that's a bit of a myth. Because I can't remember where they played. It was or the first game or the second game, and the stadium guys who was going to go in there and clean it up, they were just mind blown. They said it's cleaner than when they came in. So it
Fair
turns out
enough. Fair
the
enough.
Tartan Army so far not only happy drinking and they drank all the Sam Adams in the pub right next to where it's made, which is amazing.
Mhm.
So they finished it all. And then they also came up there in the New Japan. So nothing but the respect. Scotland may not play the best football, but they have amazing fans for
It
sure.
always does make you wonder how good a UK team would be. Like, I get why they don't do that,
Yeah,
but
Team
how good
GB
would
and
a
that.
U
Yeah. That's
like,
right. Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
I apologize to all of Scotland. I feel like they drove the McCrackens out a long time ago, so I maybe maybe I'm allowed to be a little bit mean.
I think you can. That's true. Hey, listen,
Alright,
on the
so
final note, have you looked at the injury list on the
oh
AFL?
my gosh, yeah, we're due to get about 6 guys back from the Swans, so we're
Errol Golden's
shifting,
coming
obviously, to
back.
AFL
He's
talk.
coming soon,
Errol
and
Golden will play. I
he will
speak it into
play.
existence.
Yeah.
And
When
maybe
this
a
goes
bunch of
out, we
other
will have
guys.
played the Lions, right? So that's fine. But
We
then,
will.
and that's okay because they have a Coleman and McCluggage out for a bit longer. So I think um, I hope we do. I mean, we've got some narrow wins, but you got to say
We
that Freo is
have.
looking amazing still.
Yes. So, as we've talked about in the past, the Cleveland STR, CoStar News Hotels like office has adopted it. We've all individually adopted teams. I'm very vocal about my Swans fandom. Dan Kubaki in our office is a Dockers fan now,
Yeah,
and he is thoroughly enjoying. I also looked it up too. They're one of only 3 teams in the competition that's never won the premiership. I
this
was
is
unaware
why
of that until
a
recently.
lot of people
And
say, "Oh,
also
they will choke again."
they've also had the longest wait of those 3 because the other 2 are the 2009 teams, the
That's right.
GWS and Gold Coast. So
Yeah,
good for Fremantle, good for Perth.
yeah.
I mean, it's
And
not
by
like
the way,
Perth
Fremantle's
specifically have
injury
not
list
had
is almost
championships.
empty. Yeah, they don't have anyone injured,
Well,
so they're going to keep playing well.
on that note, we will cede our time to Wharfie time in
That's
honor
right.
of Fremantle.
That
Thanks a
sounds
lot,
good.
Jesper.
Thank you, Sean.
I'm Terence Baker, News Editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I'm the host of The Upgrade, a CoStar News Hotels podcast for the EMEA region. In it, I discuss with special guests the pressures, challenges, joys and exhilaration that comes with managing, owning and developing hotels in our glorious multifaceted industry. Discovering the EMEA region from the scenic northern shores of Norway to the heights of Table Mountain in South Africa, and most likely some chat about birdwatching, distance running and the English Premiership. Join us wherever you find your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify and on other platforms.
This episode was recorded on June 23rd, 2026 and edited by me, Sean McCracken. Visit costar.com/hotel news for all of our coverage and find all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your platform of choice.